everybody, and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. Today we are going to be talking about the most important charts that you can follow right now to know exactly when alt season is about to take place. Altcoins run in the final year of our 4-year cycle, and that's exactly what 2025 is shaping up to be. I'm going to go through and break down the most important charts that we have so that you guys are knowing exactly how to be positioned and prepared to capitalize on this major alt season, because I got a lot of confidence this is going to be the biggest one that we've ever seen up to this point. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you find any value in this video, please do me a favor, hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. Without further ado, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, here we are going to be talking about what I think are the most important charts that you could be tracking to know when alt season is going to take place. We're going to be looking back at all of the altcoin prior cycles so that you guys know exactly how to play this one today, how it could be similar, how it can also maybe be a little bit different. Right off the bat, the most important thing that we can talk about is really the Bitcoin price and talking about this Bitcoin dominance and its relationship with the altcoins as a whole. This is going to be the altcoin total market cap, and when we're talking about all of these, I think that this relationship that they share is going to be the most clear giveaway for how to position yourself in any of the cycles. Now, coming all the way to the beginning of the altcoins, you pretty much go all the way to 2013. Technically, Bitcoin dominance doesn't come here until April of 2014, but most of the oldest altcoins really came on scene in that 2013 bull run, right in this final move where Bitcoin topped at $1,200. The Bitcoin dominance is a relationship with the altcoins. So whenever we see this relationship drop, it means that money is ultimately exiting Bitcoin and entering into the altcoins. And what we saw was our very first cycle for the altcoins was really that 2017 bull run, where Bitcoin dominance dropped from 95, 96%, all the way at 35% at the ending of that 2017 bull market. So that was what was taking place throughout this entire cycle over in here. But if we notice, Bitcoin had that big bull run, but many of the altcoins in 2017 actually outperformed it, considering altcoins in their very first cycle went from about 50 million in market cap all the way up to 500 billion in market cap. So they actually had a much greater cycle than Bitcoin did. When we're talking about just sheer amounts of, upside potential, they did outperform Bitcoin as far as that goes. And that's why we see this chart drop so significantly. It's because so much of that money that was inside of Bitcoin and centralized, not so much centralized, but concentrated into Bitcoin, it started to filter out, trickle down, and go into the altcoins. And we saw some of those outperform in massive ways, specifically Ethereum. And that is really where the Bitcoin dominance comes into play. Every new cycle, we see Bitcoin run to a new all-time high, and it's inside of that final move for Bitcoin that really we see the altcoins run, because it takes a long time for Bitcoin. From the bottom of its bear market to the point of it making an all-time high, this one was 790 days. And if we're looking at where that was for the Bitcoin dominance, it was basically right at this point where we started to break down. It was in this move where Bitcoin made that new all-time high. Even though we did pull back, that was where this big first breakdown candle came in the dominance. So what we see is it takes about 3 years worth of Bitcoin just steadily outperforming, going up at an outperforming pace against the altcoins. But once Bitcoin starts to enter price discovery, that is really where the shift takes place. And the question is, where is the shift taking place in this cycle? Because we've seen two different things take place in our prior cycles. If we come over here and look at our last cycle in 2020, 2021, what you guys are going to notice here is Bitcoin followed a little bit of a different story. This was its all-time high. It really wasn't when Bitcoin first went into a new all-time high that altcoins started to outperform. In fact, it was in that first run for Bitcoin into new all-time highs that we actually saw a lot of outperformance in the Bitcoin dominance. Altcoins really weren't doing anything all the way down here when Bitcoin broke out and retested 10K. Bitcoin dominance was actually at the point of making a reversal and starting this big move. So Bitcoin dominance actually outperformed all the way from $10,000 to $42,000. And that was the point where we finally saw the Bitcoin dominance peak and rotate into those altcoins. And it was in that final sort of move in the Bitcoin dominance falling back to support that we really saw the biggest outperformance in those altcoins right in here. Because if we're looking at the altcoin chart, they really weren't doing anything throughout this entire period when Bitcoin was running into a new all-time high. They were starting to make their runs to their prior all-time highs, But it wasn't until Bitcoin finally peaked at 42,000 that we saw this move for the altcoins running into a new all-time high. So we saw a little bit of a difference. In 2017, it was really the second Bitcoin ran into price discovery, altcoins ran harder. In the last cycle, Bitcoin ran from $10,000 all the way to $42,000 before we ever saw the altcoins make a new all-time high. And as we're looking at this current cycle today, I think it's very important that we're looking at both of these factors because we don't fully know how it's going to play out. Up to this point, we've seen Bitcoin make that new all-time high, right? This is the thing that we've always been watching for, knowing that once Bitcoin enters price discovery, historically speaking, one of two things can happen. We can see Bitcoin and altcoins run together, or how it was in the last cycle, Bitcoin can outperform into a new all-time high, and eventually we will see that rotation take place into the altcoins. And so far, if we're looking at where altcoins are today, they've been uptrending, but they're still below their prior all-time highs. This is still below all of the range highs and resistance. We've had this pullback with Bitcoin in here as Bitcoin's pulled back, but Bitcoin's made this big move into price discovery, right? So we've seen a little bit of a difference. Bitcoin went from $50,000 all the way to nearly $110,000. Peaked at about 108 or 109 depending on where you're looking. And so when we're looking at Bitcoin today, up to this point Bitcoin has been the outperformer. It's made a big outperformance to start this first run into new all-time highs. And if we're looking at the Bitcoin dominance, even though we've seen this sort of pullback in here, we've held support up to this point. We dropped all the way back down, had this big wick, but the price ended up closing all the way back up here on top of support. So at the end of the day, this is still holding. It could be an indication that this is about to break down, but we're going to watch and monitor this because we could see one more move here into Bitcoin dominance as Bitcoin makes a further move into price discovery and altcoins finally start to get into new all-time highs. But I wouldn't be surprised if that breakdown is about to take place right now, considering altcoins are so close to a new all-time high. The total market cap is just right below our monthly candle body closes. Once we can get a confirmed close above this, we're already going to be into price discovery. So I think that rotation is already here for the altcoins. And we could be at that point where this is kind of that first breakdown that is going to take place. This could be the first little lower high. Even though we're holding support right now, we still have 8 days to go before this monthly closes. So depending on how things bottom, depending on how things perform over the next month or so, we could see things, change drastically. So if that's the case, there's really only two things that are going to happen. We're either going to see Bitcoin dominance drop back down here and make our first reversal for the altcoins, or we're going to end up seeing this thing make one more final move, kind of like what we did in the last cycle. I don't really care which one happens because I think that inevitably, even if we make one more final move, we're right on the cusp of altcoins making that big rotation. And I think that with Bitcoin now at a new all-time high, I've seen so much more retail adoption than ever before. A lot of people are reaching out and asking me for help. This is exactly the same stuff that happened in the last cycle before altcoins started to go crazy. And I'm anticipating it's going to be a lot more of the same similarities once again. So when I'm looking at all three of these charts, I think it's important that we're factoring in that once this Bitcoin dominance rotates, that's where the altcoins are going to make their big moves into price discovery. And I anticipate that this cycle is going to be a lot more parabolic than the last one. There wasn't nearly as much money flowing around as indicated by this small little drop in here. If we're looking at the Bitcoin dominance, we dropped from 73, 74% all the way down to about 39. But we didn't even make a retest of that all-time low. Technically a higher low because we were below resistance, but it's a higher low. We were working on a higher high, but I still find it likely that this is going to end up dropping and it's going to reverse down in here. The question we have going into the cycle is, if Bitcoin dominance comes all the way back down to this same support at near 40%, I do think that we could see a bounce off of that level, coming back up and retesting this resistance here at about 48%. This is the resistance that we were holding, throughout the bear market, when Bitcoin was starting to bottom, when it was all throughout this period over in here. That was really the point where Bitcoin dominance was just chopping. We've made this big move, but technically this is still just a lower high from all of these prior levels. So if we are to see that rotation take place, I think the Bitcoin dominance is going to be falling from 61% all the way to 38%. And when we're coming all the way back down off of this level, I think that we're going to have this dead cat bounce to this resistance here. And then from there, if we see a final breakdown from that level, we could be looking at the first new all-time low for Bitcoin dominance since all the way back here in the 2018-2017 cycle. So at that point, I really do believe that we are setting ourselves up for potentially the biggest altcoin season since that 2017 bull run. And it really all rides around what happens with this chart. If this chart breaks down and we see a new all-time low, we're going to see altcoins break out and have absolutely massive cycles. And I do think it's all kind of setting up that way with all of the ETFs and institutional money that's going to be flooding around. Not even to mention all of the retail adoption that's going to take place as well. So all of these things are having the potential where we could see the same size move as our last cycle for altcoins take place right in here, and then we'll still have another move into new all-time lows on this secondary breakdown here. So at that point, we could be looking at two major shifts inside of these altcoin prices that are really going to propel them into massive new all-time highs. And it was similar in that 2017 cycle. Notice how we dropped from 96% all the way down to about 50% and made this lower high before we made that final capitulation here. And this is really Bitcoin dominance, but remember, when this fell, altcoins were having their massive blow-off tops in 2017, right? So we could have something similar where we have this first big breakdown coming back down to support down in here. Maybe we hit 40%. Maybe we even retest all the way back down at the very all-time low from 2018 at 35%. We see that bounce back up into these resistance levels before we have another big shift that's similar to that 2017 cycle, where that's kind of that final blow-off top for the altcoins. I still think Bitcoin's going to have a blow-off top. I don't think that it's going to, not outperform along the ways with the altcoins, but the difference is Bitcoin can still make these big moves in the same ways that it did in 2017. Keep in mind, 2017, Bitcoin had a much bigger blow-off top than many altcoins, yet once Bitcoin made that lower high, at the top of that lower high, that was where the altcoins ran. So we can see things in the market where Bitcoin can actually make a lower high going into the bear market, and that's where the altcoins outperform. So the charts can end up just outperforming both at the same time the whole way, except Bitcoin's going to continue to be the driver of value with all of the institutions backing it, and that could be the thing that propels us into that secondary shift, right? If we were to see altcoins run how they were in 2017, Bitcoin made this first lower high to begin our bear market, and at the top of that lower high was where altcoin or Bitcoin dominance fell, and they made their final blow-off tops into new all-time highs. So I don't know how it's all going to stack up. All we can do is really just look at how the prior cycles have played out and give us the clearest idea what to expect going into this cycle. How could it be maybe similar? What could be different about it? And when I'm looking at this, I think that the best strategy we can really do is look to target support back down in here from 38% back down to about 35% dominance, because once the market drops back into there, I find it likely we're going to have kind of that midway shift, right? Where many of the prior cycles, we've always seen the biggest outperformers. Solana, Phantom, Terra Luna was another example. XRP, Stellar, Doge in the first cycle in 2017. There's a lot of different cryptos that have been big outperformers, but when they make their big breakouts into new all-time highs, they always have that big sell-off that takes place. And it's during that sell-off that I think that we could be seeing that Bitcoin dominance bouncing off of this support. So the way that I think that we can strategize and play this, if you're looking to compound and trade, would be to target support back down in here, even if we make another high before that move takes place. Target support on that drop back down to about 38 to 35%. And once we get back down to those levels, take some profits, because altcoins are going to be really pumped a lot. They're going to be into price discovery, having already made big moves. And I think that it's at that point where we're going to see that midway correction take place. Bitcoin will correct, altcoins will correct, and you want to be into cash in that period. That's where we're going to see this start to bounce back up. And once this rallies back up into that 48% dominance, that resistance that we held inside of our bear market, I think that that's the point where we want to rotate back into the altcoins before that final breakdown takes place. I don't know how big that secondary breakdown is, but it could be a really big one. Like I've always stated, it could be the biggest alt season that we've ever seen up to this point, which is why I have a lot of confidence that retail is going to step up in a big way this cycle. With all of the institutional development, not only are we seeing institutions inside of Bitcoin, but they've also spread out into many of the other altcoins. And I do believe that this is something that's going to play out, in the rest of 2025, but in a much bigger way. When we're talking about retail adoption, retail is always here to drive up the prices, to create exit liquidity for these institutions that are buying in early to take profits. So I do think that we're going to have to see a lot of outperformance in these altcoins, because we're going to have a lot more liquidity entering the market. And it makes sense that a lot of the retail investors aren't going to consolidate into Bitcoin. They're going to be consolidating into the altcoins, the meme coins, the funny stuff that they always end up buying. That's really what I think is going to be playing out in this cycle, but we're going to still see all altcoins take off. The ones that have good use cases, the ones that have those strong fundamentals, they will outperform massively. But this cycle, more than anything, I think that everything has an opportunity of outperforming. We've already seen memes, we've already seen AI, we've seen a number of these narratives already starting to spin off, and now I kind of think that we're going to enter back into DeFi. We're going to see a lot of these DeFi protocols blowing up, no matter what they are, and once DeFi takes off, we're going to see a number of new opportunities in the market, and that's really where the everything cycle starts to play out. And I think we're really close to that point. We're going to have most likely two big shifts to take profits and rotate back into altcoins. And that's how I'm looking to compound my gains to the maximum going into this bull run. So guys, if you did find any value in this video, please do me a favor, hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. If you guys want to be able to follow anything I'm doing with my portfolio over the course of these cycles, I'm running a 25% discount throughout the rest of December. So you guys have about a week to get into that. If you guys do want to sign up for that, links are in the description to go ahead and get that 25% discount. With that being said, I love you guys, I appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we do over this cycle, because I'm telling you, this is going to be a big altcoin cycle that we can make a lot of money on long term. Thank you so much for the support. I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.